Today, we have Adam Schmidt, the Director of Appraisal with Compeer Financial with us. Those who have livestock and production buildings need updated values from time to time. Adam will talk through factors that impact the value and talk through some considerations on how to preserve and maintain the values you have in your facilities. You are listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Cassie Munger and Rachel Bork, powered by Ascent Advisors. Our discussions will focus on all things related to ag business planning, transition and succession planning, estate planning, and everything in between. Planning for change is inevitable, and keeping focus on the priorities and objectives of everyone within the family and business should always be top of mind. Tune in as we hear from special guests, peers, and industry experts to discuss topics we can all relate to. Hello, welcome back, listeners. We are still with Adam Schmidt, Director of Appraisal with Compeer Financial. This is our last week with Adam. Excited to talk about the topic and kind of a market update on facilities. We know a lot of our clients and folks have production buildings, livestock facilities, and it's important to understand as an appraiser, how you look at that value and how things impact that value over time. So Adam, I'll let you kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Cassie. And we get this a lot, and maybe mostly from our loan officers, but also from producers is, hey, what do you think that's worth? Is there like a rule of thumb? And that's a really hard question to answer when you're talking, maybe a dairy facility or a swine facility or a poultry barn, because there's so many factors that go into what impacts value. And without seeing it, without having a better understanding of where is it located, that's a really hard question to answer. So let's talk about a few things. Location is a big deal. And it's even a bigger deal depending on what type of facility you're talking about.
If you're the only facility in a 30-mile radius.
Well, and like a dairy barn, that milk has to go somewhere and someone has to pick up that milk. And so do you have access to end markets for milk? Or on the swine side, proximity to a feed mill and where there's integrators in the area. And these days, this is more on the south side, but health and location away from other concentrated areas is a big deal. So location of livestock barns is a big deal. Size also is too. Efficiencies, all that stuff.
It's about demand.
Yes,
and what folks are looking for.
Smaller dairies are not as prevalent. A lot of times when that older generation is done utilizing a smaller dairy, maybe a smaller tie stall dairy, we've seen that market shift to larger, more efficient. Same thing is happening in the swine and poultry side is, larger facilities that are more efficient, more cost effective to operate. So size is a big deal as well.
Here's a question. You got a dairy facility or dairy site, as far as manure capacity, is that something that's considered, especially if it's expandable, if they've got capacity and maybe they have a permit to double the herd, having that existing in place, there's extra value in that, or how do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, hard to quantify, but yes, I mean, and definitely, as we go forward and you just kind of think about the environment and certain counties, certain areas of the state, in Minnesota particularly, more difficulty putting bigger facilities in certain areas and getting permitted for those facilities. And if you've got an existing one and your permit allows you to expand without having to go through the new permitting process, that's going to be pretty attractive if you aren't looking to sell that facility or have it valued for whatever reason. Condition. Let's talk condition. Condition is another big one. And that's probably the hardest thing when you get that question, what do you think it's worth? Well, can I see what kind of shape it's in?
Right.
We see this time and time again, facilities, barns that are maintained very well, kept up on, any deferred maintenance, very much preferred in the marketplace. And it's not unlike a house, that's in good condition versus one that's been let go a little bit. So how well has that been kept up on? Normal maintenance issues? Have there been improvements that have been made over time? You can generally tell a barn or facility that's been taken well care of And if you have, buyers looking at, or when we're looking at comp sale transactions, certainly those that are in good shape, good condition, and a buyer's going, hey, I don't need to do much.
Right.
I don't have a lot of CapEx right away. Yeah, to deal with right away. Definitely preferred.
And that's a great call out, because as we work with our clients, often we, as we're having the conversation, they'll maybe anticipate, CapEx spending for equipment and those types of things, but they don't always have allocated capital to go towards improvements on these facilities. And we want to make sure, as we're putting our plans together and working with our clients, that part of our analysis, we're factoring that in long term to at least maintain. The goal is that you continue to improve, but you have depreciation each year on your buildings, and unless you're putting something back into it, they're just going to depreciate.
Well, and that can be hard during the lean years where the market isn't so favorable. It's like, how do I hold back money for improvements? But definitely,
where do I cut? And that's maybe where it comes.
Generally, let's talk dairies. We're kind of using a 20-year life, and so that facility at 5% every year is going to physically depreciate. And some things that are, probably even these days, even harder, or maybe, it's harder to see or project forward, is changes in technology and automation. Seeing a lot more technology being incorporated in, seeing a lot more automation, robotics, particularly on the dairy side. And that stuff is ever changing, and it probably depreciates faster than the physical facility. So certainly that replacement CapEx is a big deal in maintaining the value of that facility.
And let's talk about that a little bit. So you brought up robotics, and we see some of these state-of-the-art beautiful robotic facilities. Let's talk about new construction versus you've got an existing site. Maybe it's even a retrofit for robotics, but it's different.
Yeah, well, it is. And one thing that this is maybe sometimes a common misnomer is cost doesn't always equal value, particularly in livestock facilities. And dairy is a good example of that, because every facility is unique. Certain things may be built to that specific owner's standards or preference, or there's forces in the market that are impacting value, where it cost me $1 million to retrofit or put in this rotary parlor, whatever it is. You may not see all that value out when it comes time to sell or get it appraised. And particularly when you think retrofit, well, there's cost and expense with removal, sizing, maybe the parlor, adding on whatever needs to be done, that doesn't always equate into, hey, if I was going to look at this without having to retrofit it, what would that look like? So certainly things to consider and think about there.
Yeah, especially, if you're working with a lender and you're trying to understand what that, as will be appraisal will look like. If you compare your bids of what the costs of the project might be, like you said, you need some collateral. You got to make sure there's equity elsewhere, because likely you may not meet those standards if you don't have other equity, knowing you won't get all of that back, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, that's tends to be how those markets operate these days. One other thing this is important to note, probably both when you think swine, poultry, or dairy, and we're seeing this play out, is if you have a contract in place on that facility. So dairy, for instance, if that milk is going somewhere, you've got a long-term relationship with the processor. Makes a big deal if someone can come in and go, hey, I've got a place to go.
Existing,
on the swine and poultry side, same thing. If you've got a contract with an integrator and you're looking to sell, or you've got a long-term contract and how does that impact value? Again, if there was a buyer, if they've got a contract and they have a place to go with animals that go in that facility, makes a big deal. Now on the swine side, there's more optionality. Poultry side, you don't have too many options if you don't have a contract on that barn. And what is that facility going to be if there's no animals in it?
Yeah, well, you can see just the impact and just how many variables there are that go into this. So thank you so much, Adam. It's been a pleasure having you these past few weeks, and I'm sure you'll be back again sometime soon.
Yep, thank you all.
Thanks, guys.